being polite to other people and making sure everybody likes you and is happy with you and thinks you're a respectful, stand-up person from a good family, like that is more important than what your own needs are. And I do feel that those principles that we saw our parents value, our aunts and uncles value, that were instilled in us when we were really young, I do believe that those have unbelievable consequences to our mental health as adult women. Don't you?
I know. Oh my God. You know, I'm going to start crying. No. Welcome to Spill the Chai. I'm Sangita Patel.
Welcome to Spill the Chai. I'm Aliya Jasmine. How's it going over there, fall weather?
I know it's a bit chilly. I'm wearing long sleeves, and I understand it's like a heat wave for you guys in LA.
It's a heat wave, yeah. It's a heat wave. I'm here in my office because we have air conditioning here. It's when it's this hot by the ocean, it's like intense.
Okay, your cup looks blue.
Oh, this is my chai this week. It has blue agave in it. I got it made next door at this great little health spot, and they make a chai latte with blue agave, and it's got like unbelievable health benefits.
That's
my
amazing.
Teeth turn blue. This is why. Cheers! Welcome to Spill
Cheers!
the Chai.
Ready to go. 1, 2, 3. Oh, wrong way. Yeah, it worked. I'm so glad that everyone's joining us. Our last few conversations have been talking about politics, talking about a little bit of everything, but this one's a very interesting aspect in terms of how we were brought up in the Asian community. But I think a lot of different communities can relate to this, and I find it really fascinating because everything's coming back to me as we talk about this concept. But are Asian kids taught to put their needs last? Which I find very fascinating because one of the things my mom used to say, if you make other people happy, you'll be happy.
So, oh my God, was that ever something that we were all brought up with, right?
Right. Yes. And that's how you bring happiness into your life, is having the willness of taking care of others before yourself, which is something I think a lot of us can relate to. But there's this popular South Asian IG account called South Asian Therapists. And we talk about mental health forever. I'm glad this exists because we all need it right now through this pandemic and getting through all of this. But this conversation that happened, a tweet was put out by Pink Luddu. It's a little bit long and we're going to show you the whole tweet. But essentially what it said was, every brown kid has been taught to say a firm no when asked if they want anything to eat or drink when visiting a relative, no matter what, no matter how thirsty or hungry. Amen to that. I remember those days. Growing up, one of my favorite stories to tell was about cousins who had the balls to say, I want a cookie and some Coke when asked. Everyone would gasp when they heard the stories. So if you're a grown adult and wondering why you can't give yourself the love you need or struggle to honor and prioritize your physical and emotional needs, start looking back to when you were first taught that your needs doesn't matter. It was probably a long time ago. When you hear that, does that make you think about what your parents told you growing up and respecting the elders when they came to your house?
Course, you always have to make sure everyone else is happy. Don't say anything that would be respect above all else, right? Like that was so important. Were you taught? I think I already know the answer for you, but were you taught to value politeness over your own needs?
Oh, for sure. As a kid, I was told when I go to a relative's house, you only eat if they ask you, and only at the times you're supposed to eat. So if they come in, they don't have chai ready yet, you're not supposed to eat until the chai is ready. And there was all these rules that were in place, but it was considered respect, right? It was not considered being or just listening to your parents. It was more of understanding what elderlies mean in your life. So yeah, growing up, I'm like, all the time. And I still do it to this day.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was never taught, like, if you go to someone's house and they offer you food, to say no. I was never taught that. But I think, which is interesting because, you mentioned this isn't just a South Asian thing. I think a lot of Asian cultures are like this. But even, like, I was talking to Mike about it, and he was saying when he was younger, and now he's half British, half Czech, and, Canadian. But he grew up being taught that when you go to someone's
Yeah.
house, you always say no, which I thought was really interesting. Um,
Wow.
yeah, right. So I think it's a little bit of it's just old school too. Like
Yeah.
you wait until you're offered something, you never like ask for something.
Yeah.
But I was taught it in different ways. I think like the food thing doesn't necessarily apply to me, but I think in a more general context,
Mhm.
being polite to other people and making sure everybody likes you and is happy with you and thinks you're a respectful, stand up person from a good family, like that is more important than what your own needs are. And I do feel that those principles that we saw our parents value, our aunts and uncles value, that were instilled in us when we were really young, I do believe that those have unbelievable consequences to our mental health as adult women. Don't you?
I know. Oh my God. I'm gonna start crying. No, it's like what my mom said to me. She said, make other people happy before you make yourself happy, and happiness will come to you, right? Making sure around you and taking care of the people around you will bring that happiness to you. And as I had my second child, I realized that's not true. Sometimes you really do have to spend time for yourself and make yourself happy. But it's interesting because when I think about my kids and we go to a friend's house, we're actually going to go to dinner after this. If they're shy from taking anything, I'll say, "Hey, Ava, do you want something to drink? Do you want?" I'll be at someone else's house now and say, "Hey, do you want something?" So that opens that conversation to be comfortable to go to towards food and being open and not shy and being able to feel like this is home for us for the next 4 hours. This is where we're gonna hang out and
Mhm.
and have a good time. So I think I've changed it that way. But also now I when I when I sit down to eat dinner and nobody else is there and the food's there, I eat. I'm ready to go. I should wait for my kids and my husband, but I like after a whole day, I'm like, okay, if they're taking their time, I'm ready to go. The food's hot, I'm ready to eat. So I'm not
Totally.
uncomfortable doing that anymore. I've changed my ways where I'm like, I'm taking care of myself.
Although I will say, and I hope you don't mind me calling you out on this or giving out too much information, but I will say that we recently had a conversation about, and you know where I'm going with this, but we had a mutual friend who I think, we realized we were both giving a lot to that person. And a consequence of that was that it was affecting our mental health. But both of us were
Mm.
like, but this person might really need us right now. And I think that even in hearing you say it and you hearing me say it, we were both calling each other out like, oh my God, like, why are you putting yourself second? Yet we were both doing it. Right. And so
Yeah.
I think that that's a consequence of how we were brought up. I mean, I think it's
Yeah. And
cultural.
it's cultural and it's just being a good human, I think. And partly it's just what we were taught is to make sure other people are happy. I mean, the reason we're on earth is to help others. And I think that's part of it. You and I get lost to the point we forget about ourselves.
Yeah.
I struggle with this, and I struggle with it for a while. We've talked about it where I need other people's approval to say it's okay to do this.
Right.
I
Which
don't
is
need it.
interesting. So this is like where I think that we as a generation who are open and realizing the
Mhm.
consequences of a lot of our cultural, social norms, is this intersection where it's like, yes, you're right. It is being a good person and it is wanting to be
Yeah.
good to others. And that there is importance in that because, we live in a very individualistic society and there is importance in like valuing this, like,
Yeah.
a greater good. But where do you draw that line? At what
I
point do you
don't
stop being a good person and start caring about yourself? Like,
I
no
don't
one's
know.
teaching us that. No one's
I
taught us
know.
that.
It's so difficult because I think we're just this new generation understanding it's okay to spend time for yourself. It's okay to be happy. I think we're my parents always thought, my mom would always say I don't think she ever took care of herself. She's always
Mhm.
give, 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 give. And I don't think she's even to this day understands it's okay for you to take care of yourself, to go for those walks, whatever it is that you want to do and
Yes.
splurge for yourself. But when growing up, she took care of us, and I think this is the generation where we're switching that and understanding the importance of it. And I think it's because in India that mentality is still there, right? And now we're here in Canada where we're taught to be individuals and understanding that it's okay to take care of yourself and focus on your career and all that. And I think that's what it is our transition. You and I don't know what that balance is yet. And I think that's where it's really hard for us. Even with our mutual friend, we're like, oh, but we still need to help because we are able to, so we should still do it, right? Even though mentally it's affecting us.
Yeah, and even though, we weren't getting it reciprocated. And I think that this is like interesting because it obviously goes beyond that example of that tweet, which was
Yeah.
about, food and drink, where is this creating a culture where never
Mm.
questioning other people
Mhm.
doesn't keep people accountable? Like when you have elders, for instance, who say
Mhm.
politically incorrect things about racism or classism, or, we've talked about the shadeism, like, and we don't correct them because we're trying to be polite. Does that not enable this like culture to keep going and this racism to keep going and not correcting our elders out of respect? Like that is a real thing in
I
a lot of Asian
know, I know.
cultures.
Like, but
So
then it's interesting to say that too, because if your grandma says something or an elderly says something, you just say, "Oh, that's how it used to be. That's their mentality. You can't really change their mind.
yeah,
That's how they're always going to think." And that's what you tell yourself to justify the situation, right? You don't speak up because she's gonna slap me, but like, you never know,
yeah,
she's gonna throw a pot at me. But that is so true, and I think that going forward, our kids' generation, hopefully they are calling people out, right? They're in a
mhm,
different world where they and you're like, you question it and you don't get angry by it, but we were just taught never to speak up when it came to the elders or people that you're showing respect to the elders, right? So
mhm.
this is a difficult situation for me because I'm really like thinking, oh my gosh, this comes from all. I need to go see my psychiatrist because now I'm thinking this all started when I was
Yeah, no,
born. This
it's
is
like it's
so
so ingrained. It's ingrained in you.
unreal.
And you're right. And you know what? You're so right because it is not just about being South Asian or being Asian in general. It is a lot about being a woman too. And I think we talked. We had a whole episode of Spill the Chai, which if you guys haven't seen, go back and watch about Indian
Oh,
matchmaking.
Indian matchmaking.
So we did a whole show about Indian matchmaking, and that is like when you watch that show, is such an example of like you see a lot of women in that show just like keep their opinion to themselves, and they're being judged on very shallow things, and it's in their in their best interest to just shut up and take it, and that's what they're taught.
Mm.
And like I just think that like this can become, we're giving very light examples, but this can be a really serious issue that actually has major life
Yeah.
implications, right?
I'm reading two books at the same time right now. One of them is Untamed by Glennon Doyle. I don't know if you read it, but essentially
Mm-hmm.
what she's saying, we were taught to follow the norm. Whatever was good for society, that's what we did. So we would always do what made everyone else happy and made things just work well together rather than just being yourself and doing things that made you excited. And I find that fascinating because at a time like this during the pandemic, that's important. That is important that we
Right.
all are doing the norm, that we are following the rules to make sure everyone is healthy. While in America, right, there is that individual, right? Everyone's thinking their own way, saying, hey, I'm an American,
It's
freedom of
my
speech,
freedom to
it's
not
my
wear a
freedom,
mask. So
right?
I don't have to wear a mask because you're taking away my freedom to wear a mask. Yeah, I mean, it's true. Like that collectivism versus
Yeah.
the individuality. And you are seeing that in like a lot of the Asian countries right now,
Hmm.
right? Where there is this sense of collectivism, and there is that sense of like people are looking out for the greater good, the public interest. You know what you were saying about like America, right? It's like this like individualistic society. How America has handled the pandemic, I think, is what you were saying, was
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
way that America has handled this pandemic is a perfect example of why an individualist society doesn't necessarily work either.
No.
So what do you do? Is there a
I
balance?
know. And I think individually it changes for everybody, right? What are your priorities? What do you want? When you look again, your mom and my mom were so, for them, the important thing was to make sure we were taking care of that. Their kids got everything they wanted, even if it meant taking away from their experience, meaning, they wanted to do something in their lives, they didn't do it. But you and I are this generation where we're like, we can try to balance both. We can have a career. I mean, I remember when I was at a company and I
Are
changed
we this generation? Because I
this,
feel like,
no,
do you see
our
these gray hairs?
generation.
I feel like we were like we might be one generation back.
Okay, fine. We're the middle generation where I was told I changed jobs, and because the other job I was working 20 hours a day, and I came to another job, and I got called out by people on social media saying, "Hey, why would you go to another job where you're full time now?" And I was like, "What's wrong with that? Why can't I have a career and a young baby? There's nothing wrong with that." So,
Mhm.
but then I felt guilty because I felt like, okay, I'm spending too much time on myself and doing things for myself. Like we talked about this in one of our conversation, where the balance is never balanced. It's just sometimes something struggles while the other doesn't struggle. But I think, I don't know, do you feel guilty when you spend more time for yourself and kind of put
A
everything else on
hundred
the
percent.
side?
You know, I was
Yeah.
even saying to Mike, like, I feel like working full time in a newsroom during a pandemic, during huge civil
Yeah.
rights movement, during this presidential election, like I have gained weight. I am not getting a lot of sleep. I am not exercising. I don't feel mentally balanced. I feel like I'm always on social media. I I feel very like I just don't feel like myself. And I
Mm.
wonder if like I need to take a little bit of time to myself. And the thought of that is like, oh my God. My parents came here during a war. They gave up everything. They were poor. They worked so hard. Like
Yeah.
I don't take a moment for granted. And I am going to work myself into the ground before I ever take, 2 months off to take yoga every day.
Yeah.
Like, but
Amen
that's
to that.
crazy
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
crazy.
Like
Like we
you,
shouldn't think like that, but I
you
do.
shouldn't.
I 100%. And the guilt that I feel even thinking about taking time off for
Mm-hmm.
myself is I know where that comes from,
Mm-hmm.
but it's guilt. I could not sit at home, even though I knew it was more healthy for myself. If I just like took, let's say a month off and just did like
Mm-hmm.
yoga every day and took a month to myself, I would feel guilt every day that I wasn't accomplishing what I was supposed to, that I was wasting time, that I wasn't, I could be doing A, B, C, and D, and I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
Like it's too ingrained in me, I think.
Yeah. You need to go do yoga, girl.
I know. I
I'm,
started doing
I'm
yoga
get,
on the beach.
yes.
Yay,
And
once a week.
and and I'm thinking about the conversation how we initially started about eating at people's house. Now I go straight to the kitchen when I go to people's houses. I don't care anymore. If I see cake, I will eat the cake. I'm like, okay. If it's out there, I eat it. So yeah, I've changed my ways when I go to people's houses. And I think we both kind of just understand that the change, it can happen. And like you said, it's not hard. We feel that guilt, but I think it's
Mhm.
possible. Like one of my friends just got married and she lives with the family. She told her friends,
Mm.
her white friends, that, I'm living with my in-laws. I'm like, and they're like, "Are you crazy? Why would you
I
do
mean,
something
that's
like
what I'm
that?"
saying right now.
Right?
Hearing you say that, I'm like, are you crazy?
And she's our
What?
generation, but she's like, "They treat me like a queen. We get along. Our life is great. My husband and I have our own space. And are you
Wow.
happy?" And she goes, "I'm happy." And I'm like, "Okay, then I'm not here to judge." But she
Yeah.
must follow those old rules. I'm sure going into a house like that with an Indian culture, they're Punjabi, that she's probably following those old rules and those ethics. And I'm sure she is that person who's, putting the food out first and making sure her husband eats first. Because if your mother-in-law is there, I'm sure she's going to get
That
upset
right.
with. So,
This is
but
like, I'm like sweating
I know,
just
I
like
could never
hearing
do
this
it.
conversation.
But she's happy, right? Like, but these are the ethics that she believes in, and I think that's part of us being in America is just our mentality switches. Even when you go to India, it's been years since I've been there, but when I did go, they still had that way. The rituals were always like that. So I don't know. I think it depends where you are. I think you and I are in that transition and we're still learning, but our guilt is built on us because of what we were brought
Mhm.
up with. But I think there's an opportunity for the next generation to change.
Yeah, and I think you and I are also outliers in some ways because we're both people that work in the arts and work in entertainment, and growing up, like
Right.
that's not something that would have traditionally made our families happy, or
No.
like I think that if I mean you were an engineer first, so you actually did make your family happy. But if you
I
weren't
did
an
that for
engineer or a
myself.
doctor, yeah, weren't an engineer or
But
a doctor, like that they would. So
yeah.
I do think that, I mean, those kind of things are changing as people make decisions more for themselves, I
So
think.
here's an example as we're talking. So my parents followed a Swami. Okay. I'm going to get in trouble for this. So they switched over to following this Swami religiously, and it was changing their life.
Wait, what's a Swami?
Like a Swami, like a guru, someone you
Oh,
follow, right? Religiously, you
okay.
follow his
Okay.
ways, and that means giving up like all these things that they had to give up, onions. Anyway, so one day they wake up and they want to do this, and 4 kids living downtown, and we were brought up in Toronto, and she's like, okay, you guys are come to me and you are going to become religious and you're going to believe in the Swami. And we go, and we were the bad kids. Because we wouldn't sit there and like, this is all bullshit. I'm not going to sit here and listen to this shit. They essentially, put women down. I was like, this is ridiculous. And we went to a kids camp, and they put us in circles. And like one woman, kid you not, said to me, what the girl is wearing on the street will cause her to get raped. It's the woman's fault. And I was like, what did you just say? And I got up and left, and my mom was livid, and she goes, there may be some truth to it. I'm like, are you kidding me right now?
Oh my God.
Oh, I know. And so my mom's gonna kill me. So then after that, like, she stopped pushing.
How old were you?
She was, oh man, I was probably 13, 14. My brother didn't even come once. Yeah, so us 3 girls had to go to straighten us up, right, kind of thing. But it was a conflict in our house, this whole Swami thing. And I'm like, you can't go from being bringing us up a certain way and then going to all this extreme. And so anyways, my parents found this type of God, but we finally came to an agreement that it wasn't for us. It wasn't for the kids. But when we went through that, girl, you should see my mom. She would not. She's like, why aren't you wearing an Indian suit? Why are you wearing jeans? I'm like, well, this is what I do. That's a really good example.
That's a great example, because it also shows that to a certain extent you were not willing to compromise the way that you thought for, right? Like there was like a limit to how much politeness and politically correctness you would even take at a young age. So that's really interesting. From your own parents, because that's a lot of, like, I will say, for people who aren't brown and who might be watching this, you have never felt peer pressure. Like, forget what you felt in high school. You have never felt the kind of peer pressure that you feel from a brown mother. Like, it is the worst kind of peer pressure.
She's gonna kill me. Yeah, like she would wake us up at 6 o'clock in the morning and goes, we're going to become very religious, and we're going to be, I'm like, we're not bad kids. We went out and had good time. You can't bring up a child in downtown Toronto. You can't immigrate to Canada and expect us to believe in the old rituals and the old ways, right? I mean, you brought us here. It's your fault. Yeah. I blame my mom for all that. But man, did it ever cause the
That's a crazy story.
I know. And my parents still believe in the Swami. They still follow his ways. Even my friend, my cousin, was part of it. They all went in together to do this, but she believed in it, and she's still very religious, and she still follows the Swami. And I'm just like, are you happy?
That's
she doesn't know
crazy.
What. Yeah, it doesn't. She doesn't know what it means. It's
probably really similar to. I had a friend of mine who his family was from Alberta, and when he was a teenager, his parents, I think he grew up, I want to say, Protestant. And I think his family, when he was a teenager, decided to become Baptist. And they started following a new priest. And he was very much like a lot more orthodox in his ways and more traditional. And I'm sure it was something similar where he felt like he went home for Christmas, and like their Christmas wasn't like a fun Christmas. It was like a very religious Christmas. And like his parents had totally changed. And he was like, what is going on now? So I'm sure other people relate to that story, because I feel like I have friends who have kind of gone through something similar.
I know.
That's so crazy.
And maybe that's what made me so more liberated. Even going back to the eating thing, where I go in and eat on my own, and when I'm at the dinner table, I will start eating. And I remember when I first got married, I thought, because I married an Indian guy, that I had to follow the rules, where I had to make sure I ate down for him in front of his parents, or when his guest came over from his family, I was supposed to do certain things. I was
serve chai. You have to serve
all of that,
chai.
right?
Yeah.
And I did it because I wanted them to like me and be the right person. But do I do it now? Hell no, it doesn't happen anymore. Like,
I still Yes, exactly. I was gonna say I still
Yeah, yeah,
serve the chai and stuff when people come over, especially like when my
yeah, yeah,
in-laws come over, even though they're not brown. But I feel like I
yeah.
should. I feel like that's like the right thing to.
Yeah,
But
but
I don't
you
know
do
that
it
that's
now because you
cultural.
want to do it. Yeah, right. Like it's different, right? Like it
Hmm.
wasn't like his his mom would say, you know, go do this or go. I'm like, that's what bothered me. It was more
Yes,
now. It's maybe
yes.
it's
Like
still very culturally accepted, but I feel
no,
good
but it's
about it now.
it is it's different because it's like not like there's this set of things that you need to do as a woman and that my mother told me I had to do. It's not, it's just that you're someone's coming into
Yeah.
your home, you want to be a hospitable
Mhm.
house guest, and there are some fun traditions that we all like love to Martha Stewart it up a little
Yeah.
bit, and entertain guests, but it's not the same as like
It's not the
this is what you need
same.
to do and you are guilty, you feel guilty if you don't do it. Like there's a difference.
I know. It's yeah. This all makes sense now why we all want to be accepted certain ways by certain people
Yeah.
and
I feel like this
yeah,
on a note, just being like this whole thing has just ended with us being like, we are.
literally and you're
No,
doing
no.
blue agave. Like, I mean,
Hey, this blue agave is my freedom. You know, this is. I know the minute all of you brown women watching this, I know the minute that I showed you that my chai had blue agave in it, you all were like, mm-mm-mm, that's not real chai. Mm-mm-mm, that's not how my mom made it. I know all you brown girls were judging me. Just think about this conversation now. Now this is freedom. Chai.
oh my god. On that note, we both need some therapy. But subscribe below. Join our conversations and let us know. I'm sure you have the same experience
Yeah,
as
write it
us.
in the comments. We would love to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify as well.
Yeah, we have some really cool stuff coming up very soon. And we're just so glad you're part of this journey. And you know what? We love having a conversation with you. So continue joining
Yes.
us.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Spill the chai, everyone.
What does that say,
Bill
Bill?
Griffiths Mike's Company mug.
Nice.